The golden envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning. Zanele Kumalo was sipping rooibos tea on the balcony of her Johannesburg penthouse when her assistant, Lindiwe, placed the letter beside her. The wax seal gleamed, embossed with the insignia of Azure Sands Resort, one of the most exclusive beachfront destinations in Mauritius. Zanele ran her fingers over the paper. She knew Azure Sands. She had vacationed nearby as a child when her father, a respected history professor, took the family to cheaper lodges, and they would stare at the glittering white villas in the distance, imagining the lives of the people inside. Inside the envelope was an invitation to the Azure Sands Summer Gala, a high-profile event where CEOs, celebrities, and royalty mingled under the tropical moonlight. The card read, "To our esteemed guest, we invite you to a night of elegance, exclusivity, and timeless beauty at Azure Sands Resort." It was signed by Claude Delacroix, the resort's French-born manager known for his impeccable manners and his reputation for catering only to the right kind of people. Zanele smiled. It wasn't her first luxury party. She was one of South Africa's youngest billionaires, having built a successful chain of boutique eco-hotels across Africa. But this was different. This was the same place she had once been told she could never belong. "Book the tickets," she told Lindiwe. "We're going to Mauritius." Mauritius welcomed her with golden sunsets and ocean breezes. Zanele arrived in a custom white silk gown designed by a young South African designer she was mentoring. Lindiwe carried her luggage, Louis Vuitton, but understated, just enough to blend with the crowd. As their chauffeured car pulled up to the Azure Sands entrance, cameras flashed. Guests in designer attire walked up the marble steps. The scent of frangipani flowers drifted through the air, but as Zanele approached the registration desk, she noticed a flicker in the receptionist's smile. "Name, please," the young man asked. "Zanele Kumalo," she replied, handing over her invitation. He scanned it, then hesitated. One moment, madam." He disappeared into the back office. Moments later, Claude Delacroix himself emerged, tall, immaculately dressed, his silver hair perfectly combed. "Madame Kumalo," he said in a voice dripping with polite frost. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. Tonight's event is a private affair." Zanele's brow furrowed. "I have an invitation, personally signed by you." "Yes," Claude replied, lowering his voice. "But you see, our guests expect certain standards. It is not always about money, but about heritage, about image. I'm sure you understand." Behind her, a couple in evening wear exchanged glances. Zanele's cheeks burned, not from shame, but from fury. "I understand perfectly," she said coldly. "Keep your party." She turned on her heel, the train of her gown sweeping behind her like a banner of defiance. That night, Zanele sat on her hotel balcony, staring out at the dark ocean. Her mind wandered back to her childhood in Durban, to the day her mother had been denied service at a whites-only hotel. She remembered the look in her mother's eyes, a mix of humiliation and rage, as they walked back into the heat. That same look now burned in Zanele's own reflection in the sliding glass. Door, her phone buzzed. It was her mentor and close friend Thabo Nkosi, a legendary property mogul. "You sound like you're grinding your teeth," he said when she answered. She told him what had happened. Thabo chuckled, not out of amusement, but as if he had been waiting for this moment. "Then buy it," What? Azure Sands. The whole thing. You have the money. I'll connect you to the shareholders. Let's see if they value their precious heritage as much as they value cash. Zanele didn't answer immediately, but deep down, she knew he was right. The next morning, Zanele dressed not for the beach, but for war. In a tailored navy suit and diamond-studded watch, she walked into a private meeting room at the resort. This time, as a prospective investor. Through Thabo's connections, she had arranged a meeting with Isabelle Laurent, the majority shareholder of Azure Sands. Isabelle was an elderly French Mauritian woman whose wealth came from generations of sugar plantations. Miss Kumalo, Isabelle greeted her warmly. I understand you wish to invest. Not invest, Zanele corrected. Acquire. There was silence. Then Isabelle laughed softly. And what makes you think Azure Sands is for sale? Zanele slid a folder across the table. Inside was an offer, generous enough to make even the most stubborn shareholder think twice. Over the next hour, they discussed figures, future plans, and potential renovations. Zanele kept her voice calm, hiding the storm of satisfaction brewing inside her. By the time she left the room, Isabelle's handshake told her everything she needed to know. The deal was as good as done. Within 48 hours, whispers began to spread. Business papers reported an undisclosed acquisition deal at Azure Sands, staff members speculated. Some guests were intrigued, others were scandalized. Claude Delacroix read the news while sipping his morning espresso. The headline made him choke. South African billionaire in talks to acquire Azure Sands Resort. His face drained of color. That evening, Zanele returned to the resort, not as a guest seeking entry, but as the soon-to-be owner. When Claude saw her, he forced a smile. Madame Kumalo, welcome back. Oh, I'm not back as a guest, Zanele said sweetly. I'm here for a final inspection. After all, one must know their property inside out. 3 weeks later, the deal was finalized. Zanele stood on the grand terrace overlooking the sea, a glass of champagne in her hand. Staff members gathered to hear her first speech as owner. She thanked them for their work, promised fair wages, and announced a scholarship program for local hospitality students. Then she looked directly at Claude. This resort will welcome anyone who can appreciate beauty, respect others, and contribute to our community. The days of judging people by their skin, accent, or heritage are over. The applause was thunderous, except from one man. A year later, Azure Sands hosted its largest gala yet under Zanele's ownership. The guest list was more diverse than ever. African entrepreneurs, artists from the Caribbean, philanthropists from Asia, and yes, even some of the old regulars. The ballroom glittered under crystal chandeliers. Jazz and African drums merged into a rhythmic harmony. Zanele wore a gown of gold and emerald, colors of prosperity and renewal. Claude, now demoted to a lesser managerial role, approached her awkwardly. Madame Kumalo, I wanted to say, no need, she interrupted. Just enjoy the party. As midnight approached, Zanele stepped onto the balcony, the same one where she had once been turned away. The ocean breeze carried the scent of frangipani. She closed her eyes, thinking of her mother, of the little girl staring at luxury from behind a fence. She had crossed that fence. She had torn it down. A reporter approached, microphone in hand. Ms. Kumalo, what inspired you to buy Azure Sands? She smiled. Because no one has the right to decide who belongs and who doesn't. Here, everyone belongs. Truth Ties, where stories reveal the heart of justice.